My name is John Miller. I am the founder and president of Scribewise. We're very thrilled to have you all here today to hear a very interesting presentation from Lee Price, a very smart woman we've gotten to know this year a little bit, and I think you're going to enjoy the next 45 minutes or so. First, let me tell you a little bit about Scribewise. We're a brand dialogue agency, and the idea behind us calling ourselves that is that there is a conversation that occurs around every brand, around your brands. And as marketers, we are duty bound to positively impact that conversation. We know we can't completely control it in a social media driven world, but we have to impact that conversation and make it better and make it complementary to our customers so that they build a relationship with us, a trust-based relationship. So our primary focuses are content creation, content experience, which is very design focused with the idea that that helps us to create an emotional connection. And then of course, content distribution. We work mostly with B2B firms, helping them to build trust with their key audiences. Excuse me. At Scribewise, we believe that marketing has gone a little bit too far in the direction of becoming automated. We've gotten a little bit carried away with all the technology available. We have to use it, but too often the tail wags the dog. So we're proponents of what we call marketing for humans, hence this webinar series that we're kicking off today. We had an event back in April. Some of you probably attended. We got very good feedback on that. And this is something we think the marketing world is ready for, is to talk about marketing for humans. This is our first in the series. We have our second one set for October 20th with Heidi White, the CMO of Navigate, a consulting firm that has embraced content marketing. So we hope you all sign up for that as well. One side note, because this is about humanity, we want to help our fellow humans, including those a little bit less fortunate than us. So we have a small charitable effort that we'd like you all, if possible, to get involved in. Scribewise is making a donation to a favorite cause of Lee's called the National Diaper Bank Network. The National Diaper Bank Network provides diapers to families who cannot afford them. If you're a parent, you know you can race through them very quickly. So we're going to match your donations today with a minimum of $250. That does not mean that you have to donate $250. $5, $10 would be great, but our donation will be a minimum of $250. And if you want to make Scribewise pay more, this is your chance to donate to a very important cause. You can donate. We'll put the link. The link is in the chat. You can see donate.nationaldiaperbanknetwork.org/marketing for humans. It's also available on the scribewise.com/marketing for humans landing page. Anything you can give is obviously greatly appreciated. So let me get out of the way and introduce you to our speaker today, Lee Price. She is a thought leadership consultant and ghostwriter. Lee helps visionary leaders dig up their next big ideas. Lee's been working in B2B marketing for more than a decade. She got her start at the business news publisher SmartBrief. She led marketing for a niche consumer brand and has delivered content strategy for a number of clients when she worked at a B2B content marketing agency. Her focus is on helping brands make a bigger impact by developing their unique perspective. She lives in Florida with her family. You can sign up for Lee's email newsletter, which we would heartily endorse you doing, about the future of thought leadership at leepriceideas.com. Lee, thanks so much for being here, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. John, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm actually having last minute video issues, so I'm just gonna roll with it without a video. I'm so sorry. I had everything ready to go, but in true pandemic fashion, now all of a sudden my webcam is not happy about being on Zoom. So hi, I'm waving to you invisibly. I know you can't see me, but good to have everybody here today. I wanna start with a story. And John, can you just give me a thumbs up that you can see my slides too? Okay, cool. So let's start with the story. You might be wondering, how does someone get into thought leadership? Why would you devote your career to this weird, fuzzy word, thought leadership, which is what I've done? So I have been a marketer for 13 years, and I've always approached it really from a writer's perspective, thinking about the power of messaging and words to make change. And so a few years ago, I was working at a content marketing agency and I was running a big HR media site. I was running all the content, the blogs and the podcasts about the future of work. And so I would get pitched from PR firms and marketers all the time to feature their thought leaders, the people at their companies that they thought had a really interesting vision. So one day I got pitched the founder and CEO of a new tech startup that was really rethinking the future of work. So I was excited. I got on the phone with this thought leader, the founder of this company, and literally probably 15 PR people and marketers. I mean, we had this lady just completely swarmed. And we finally get to the moment when I'm able to ask my question as the editor of this blog to say, okay, so what is your stance? Like, what do you have to say about the future of work? What do you want to do differently? And the leader I was talking to just completely paused and froze. She was quiet for a minute. And then she said, I don't know. What do you think a thought leader would say? And it just really broke my heart and made me realize that we're kind of approaching thought leadership wrong. So we had all these marketers who they had done their job of getting the thought leader to the editor. We were going to finally talk, but they really had not spent much time thinking about what the message was or what they wanted her to talk about. And so I realized that we're spending a lot of time on promotion, but not a lot of time on the strategy behind our ideas. And that's why I wanted us to work to kind of demystify thought leadership and to really bring people's voices out who have good ideas. Because this person had good ideas, she just wasn't sure how to talk about them. So that's what I see as our job as marketers, is helping bring those ideas out. So let's define modern thought leadership. And I'm going to ask for some participation here too. So get ready to give me an answer in the chat. All right, when you hear the word thought leader, tell me the first word that comes to mind. Open up the chat and put your answer in the chat. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear thought leader? And Cassie or John, you might, okay, I can see the chat now. Okay, so Lauren says expertise. Rex says CEO. Catherine Stewart says public speaker. Keep leaving your ideas in the chat. Subject matter expert. So let's think about what a thought leader could be, because there are kind of a lot of different definitions. And sometimes I hear from people kind of negative definitions, like you're giving me a lot of positive ones like expert and futurist and ghostwriter, speaker, but sometimes people think about ego or, you know, bros writing on LinkedIn. So how can we rethink that definition to meet our modern definition of thought leadership? So here's how I define thought leadership. I think a thought leader is a person, not a company. A company doesn't have ideas. A brand doesn't have ideas. People have ideas. So it's a person who is thinking in public. They're not keeping all of their ideas behind closed doors or waiting to put them out on a press release. They're thinking openly and sharing with other people. Here's what they're sharing. This is important to me. They're sharing their expertise, first of all. This is what we think about most often. So what they know, what are they really good at? If they've been working in their field for 30 years, they probably have learned a lot. What do they know? What are the hard facts and lessons? But there's something else that comes into the equation here. It's not just what they know, it's how they know it. So I think people are most interested in a thought leader's perspective. I think of that as the story behind what they know. So how did they learn it? What's kind of the winding road that they took to get there? What mistakes did they take along the way? They didn't just show up 30 years into their career with these concrete ideas in their head. They went through a path to learn them. And I think that perspective, it's what's most interesting and most helpful for people who are way back on the path right now. They're also sharing their vision for the future. So they're looking to the past to share what they know, how they learned it, but they're also looking forward to share a vision for the future. And that's really important too. And I also wanted to touch on, so, okay, there's one thing to coach thought leaders, you know, back in 2019 when people were getting on planes and going on speaking on stages. But what does it mean to be a thought leader during a pandemic? And I think this is important to think about because I've really seen thought leadership evolve over the past couple of years. So it's evolving because people have to have the courage to really show up and share their live thought process. which is often unmediated or less mediated by their staff, their support teams, their marketing and PR people. So they really have to have the courage to show up. They have to be comfortable sharing iterative ideas. Everything is changing constantly. I mean, where we work is changing. The headlines on the news are changing. Whether we're going to get more vaccines is changing. Whether my kids are going to go to school today or not is changing. Everything's changing. So thought leaders now can't think of themselves as kind of these pillars that are stable and steady. They are part of the change too. So that means we have to be comfortable sharing more iterative ideas and knowing that things are going to change tomorrow. I've also seen a lot of people become a lot more open about all this change and the confusion and the ambiguity. Denying it would not be very human at all, right? Like we all know that things are very confusing right now. So I've seen people really lean into that and really showing the human reality of what it's like to just be a person living and working right now during a pandemic. So I think all of these are really positive changes because I think we're seeing kind of behind the curtain, seeing more of the human behind the leader. Okay, so if you're a marketer thinking about how you bring thought leadership into your marketing platform, sometimes I help people think about 3 kinds of thought leaders because it just kind of gives you an opening to get started if you aren't sure where to start. So to help us think about those categories that I'm going to tell you about, I want you to tell me in the chat, who is a thought leader who you really admire right now? Who is someone that you're watching or that you're interested in following? If you don't want to leave it in the chat, you can just think about it in your head, but think about that one person who you follow online, or you always read what they write, or you always want to see them speak. Who's the person who would really get you excited to see them talk about business? Okay, so think about that person and think about, okay, Mark Cuban, Adam Grant, Anne-Marie Slaughter, Ann Handley. Yes, 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 and yes. What is it about that person that makes you excited to hear what they have to say? Think about that. So what is it? What is kind of a character trait or a personality trait or something that you know that they're going to show up with that makes you know that they're someone reliable to follow and watch? So as you think about that, I want to think about kind of which type of thought leader you might respect the most. What bucket do they fall into? So I think about 3 kinds of thought leaders: beacons, curators, and challengers. And you know, a lot of people's personalities could fit into all 3 of these buckets, but this is, again, kind of an entry point, a way I help people start thinking about becoming a thought leader, getting someone else into thought leadership. So beacons are the traditional profile that we think of when we think about a thought leader, someone who's a founder, who is building something publicly, and they're really setting an example and shining for others. Curators are a completely different personality, where maybe they don't have really bold or challenging new ideas to share. They're not pushing the envelope, but they are really great at gathering resources and connecting people with new ideas and connecting people with other people. And then we have challengers, people who are really pushing the envelope, who have something new to say, who want to start a conversation. So I wanted to give you some examples. So we're going to look at 2 examples of each of these types: beacons, curators, and challengers. Okay, so beacons, they're like a lighthouse. They're working in public. They're shining as an example. It is clear to see what they're working on and what they're thinking about. Here's an example. This is Stephanie Nadi Olson. She started a company called We Are Rosie that matches marketing talent with jobs and opportunities. And her whole perspective is about thinking about a new way to give people work, kind of a modern way of doing freelance work. And she's also really passionate about opening access to work, and in the process, kind of changing both what it means to be a marketer and what that end marketing product looks like if it's more inclusive and kind of brings more voices to the conversation. One thing I wanted to say about Stephanie, and one reason I pulled her as an example, is that you can see she doesn't have 1 million followers, right? Being a thought leader doesn't necessarily mean being a celebrity. It means having something to say to the people in your little world and having something to say that's different, that's going to kind of pull them along on your journey. She could be doing all of her work quietly without talking about it online, but she would not have made nearly the impact that she's made in the last couple of years. So let me show you kind of how she talks about her work online as a beacon. So she shares her vision and her why. She is someone who's thinking about the future of work, and she's thinking about how we can use our current talent crisis to really create an opportunity to pull in more people who have been overlooked in the past and really rethink the way that we bring people together to work. She's talking about this. We know why she started the company. We know what her perspective is on work. She also goes on other people's podcasts and talks about this stuff. So she's talking about the future of work on other people's podcasts. She's getting really specific and detailed. And I wanted to say too that, being a beacon and having something to say and putting it out online, it involves a certain amount of risk. She's going to say stuff that other people don't agree with. She's going in a specific direction. And so I think it's important to acknowledge and accept and think about how being a thought leader means saying something. And that means taking some risk, and not everyone's going to be on the same page as you. She's also really open about her thought process, about how she makes her decisions. So she talks about decisions that she's made and kind of the outcome of what happened as a leader. Here's an example on LinkedIn. She's talking about how she gave all of her employees an annual stipend for kind of self-development to spend however they wanted to. So she's sharing these decisions kind of as they're happening and sharing what happened as a result. And that's why I think of her as a beacon. She also, this is important too, just like we talked about, there's a lot about work that's hard. There's a lot about being a leader of a company that's hard. And she is open about sharing that. And I've seen her build a lot of community online around, the hard parts of being a founder, a CEO, a leader, what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed or like the risk is too much. So I've appreciated how she's authentic enough to share that view. Okay, here's my second beacon. This is Tiffany Dufu. Tiffany is a great example of a beacon. You can see she does have a lot more followers. She has 13,000 followers. She spent her career doing work for women and girls, bringing women and girls together and lifting them up. She wrote a book a couple years ago called Drop the Ball that was about kind of the juggle of keeping all the balls in the air, and how her solution was to start dropping the ones that actually didn't matter. So let's think about what Tiffany does here. Tiffany makes her vision really clear. So this screenshot is from her website. She says, "My life's work is advancing women and girls." She draws a line in the sand very clearly. We know who she is and what she's fighting for, what she's working for. And that really clear, simple message, she's obviously spent some time thinking about what matters to her, and she focuses on it really clearly online. Tiffany is also really good at packaging and branding her ideas. And this is something important for marketers to think about, right? People might have a lot of great ideas, but if no one knows about them, they don't really make an impact. And a lot of helping people know about an idea is packaging and branding the idea, kind of naming the idea, giving it a name. So Tiffany for years had a YouTube series that she called Tiffany's Epiphanies that were just these simple little videos. They shot in the same place in their office every week. Where she would have, you can see just a really short little clip talking about one thing she had realized that was important related to her brand and what she was trying to build. This is a great example of a simple way to package and share your ideas. She also really generously and authentically shares what she's learning. She talks about that path, right? She talks about how she's learned the lessons that she learned, not just what she knows. So she is just kind of a joyful person to follow online because she shares really openly about what she's gone through. And finally, as a beacon, Tiffany lifts others. And this is something that I see all three types of thought leaders doing. It's not just about elevating their own voice and creating a platform for themselves. It's about lifting others too. So Tiffany is constantly sharing books she's read by other people. She's sharing faces of the people she's working with and collaborating with and helping. She's constantly kind of bringing up other resources and people you should be watching if you're interested in what she's doing too. So that's something I really admire about her. Okay, so that's a beacon. Let's think about the curator. A curator is a great entry point to thought leadership. And often if someone comes to me and they really want to use their ideas to grow their brand, or they're selling their ideas as a service and they're not sure how to talk about it online. I help them think about how they could be a curator, which means really just bringing together the best ideas and resources they know. And when I think about curators, everybody has a friend who knows all the best restaurants and always has the best recommendations for the next movie you should watch, and has read all the best books, right? The person you go to ask when you need advice or you need a recommendation. That's what curators are. And there's a lot of magic in this. It sounds simple, but I've seen people do really cool stuff. So here's my first example. This is Brendan Schrader. He's my friend who we worked together for a long time on his marketing at his company, Antenna, which is based in Minneapolis and is another marketing consulting firm that matches marketers with roles inside big companies. Brendan is a master curator and people person. He's been working in kind of a new way of working, right? Like gig economy, basically, since before the gig economy was even really a thing. So he's been around a while, and he knows a lot of people, is well connected, and has a lot of good resources. So let's look at how he kind of puts those resources into action as a curator. So right when the pandemic started, Brendan told me that he was hearing from his clients, from his friends, from everybody he knew in the marketing world saying, oh my God, what is happening? What are we going to do? How are we going to plan through this? We don't know what's coming next. How do we think about this? And Brendan said, yeah, I don't know that I have all the answers right now either. So he didn't publish a think piece with his 5 pieces of advice for marketers. What he did was he created a microsite where he curated tons of resources. He talked to every marketing leader he knew about how they were thinking about this. He pulled together resources that he had. He asked people how they were doing their planning if they didn't know what kind of the next quarter was going to look like. He asked people who had already been managing their teams remotely what they had learned that they could share for people who were new to that. And he pulled it all together to help people online. This is a master example of being a curator, especially in a time when people really needed answers. He also shined a light on people. So like I said, he pulled in all the marketers he knew. He pulled in kind of like the best piece of advice from each marketer, and he had a long list of people. This is just one example, but curators are good not only at pulling resources together, but at pulling people together too, because often when you're trying to solve hard problems, you don't just need data and facts, you need people too, people to talk to. Brendan also has a podcast. Like I said, he's been working in kind of the new gig economy for a long time. So he knows a lot about how work is changing and will continue to change. So he has a podcast called The Way We Work. And I feature a podcast here because I think interview-based podcasts where there's a host, the host is the thought leader, who's interviewing guests. It's a great way to get into thought leadership as a curator. There's not a lot of pressure on the hosts because they're just finding the people and bringing them together to talk about the ideas that they're interested in. Without having to, record an hour-long podcast where they're sharing what they think. The value they're bringing is pulling the people and the ideas together. Brendan also really gathers and activates his community as a curator. So here's another example from the early pandemic days. Brendan feels strongly about helping Second Harvest Food Bank. It's a nonprofit that he and his company have given a lot of man hours and money to over the years. So they started hearing from people, we really wish we could get together for coffee meetings. No one could see each other. They were missing each other. So here's the challenge he gave his community. It was called #CoffeeUp. He said, pick a friend who you wish you could meet for coffee, donate $10 or the cost of 2 cups of coffee. And in their name, you're going to provide 30 meals for Minnesota families through Second Harvest Food Bank. So it was a way to activate people in a time when they wanted to help, when they were feeling kind of isolated, doing it, still kind of under the professional brand, but a way to bring a community together in a new way. That was something that I thought was really cool and smart. Okay, second example of curator. I'm trying to go fast here. So you may have heard of Arlen Hamilton. She is doing really cool things in the world of venture capital. So she started Backstage Capital. She's written a book about why she did it. Basically, she felt like she wasn't being given the time of day, given any attention by venture capital firms. She could see how it was this white male boys club that she couldn't get into. So she decided to change it. Arlen is a master curator too. She's definitely a challenger as well because she has a lot of ideas about how she wants to drastically change things. But I've seen how Arlen is sharing resources for people who are also interested in creating more equality and access around finance. So here's an example of how she's pulled resources together. She heard people had questions about, like, how does venture capital work? I don't really understand about fundraising or financing. She had those same questions and didn't really have a good way to find answers. So she pulled together a whole academy. You can see there are 35 hours you can watch about kind of the basics of VC and how you can break into that world and close your knowledge gap. So she's sharing resources and ideas, not just keeping them to herself. And she's also constantly flagging new solutions. So here she's flagging a solution called Goal Setter, another startup with the goal of giving kids bank accounts early in life to set them up for financial freedom and literacy later on. So I love the way that she's kind of flagging and tapping and pulling in other people who are doing the same kinds of work that she is. She's a great curator. Okay, number 3, this is kind of the most fun and interesting bucket of thought leader, the challenger, people who are offering new perspectives. They are starting new conversations and they're challenging the way we think. My first example is my friend Katie Martell. She is a marketing speaker and consultant, and you can see even on her LinkedIn profile, she's calling herself an unapologetic truth teller. She's pushing the boundaries and she's really devoted her career to questioning some traditional marketing practices. So she questions all kinds of norms. She says, okay, brands, you have a big campaign around Earth Day, or you want to get involved with a rainbow colored logo during Pride, right? But what are you really doing? Are you really supporting those causes and those groups of people who matter? Or are you just, putting up a rainbow picture on LinkedIn? Are you pandering? Are you greenwashing? Are you gaslighting? Or are you really making a change? So she asks a lot of really hard questions and does some really interesting research to help us think differently about how we're marketing. She's also great at starting conversations. So this is an example. During the pandemic, Fisher-Price put out this limited time collection of kind of the new superheroes, which were basically community helpers, people who were working hard during the pandemic. And she didn't put out her opinion here. She really just asked a question and started a conversation online. Her question was basically, is this pandering, or is Fisher-Price actually helping parents and kids talk about what's going on? So it led to some kind of new viewpoints and some new conversations here. So I appreciated about her, that she's not just putting out controversial ideas, she's also helping her community talk about them. Okay, this is my last example. Doug Kessler. Since I'm talking to marketers, I figured a lot of you would probably know who Doug is. He's very funny and he's one of my favorite challengers to follow. So he's a co-founder of a B2B marketing agency, Velocity. John, I know you're a fan of Doug. And he always has kind of a new way to look at an old problem. So he's always questioning norms, just like Katie. One of his main points is that great content needs to take a stand. You got to say something, and he really pushes people to do that. He also introduces new frameworks. And again, this is around branding your ideas. If you have a bold idea, name it and brand it so that people remember it. So this is one of my favorite things he's published. I think it's a few years old at this point, but it was called A Stakeholder Through the Heart, which was basically saying the stakeholders, the people that are kind of monitoring our work, are sometimes really destroying our marketing. And here's how marketers can approach that problem proactively and rethink it. So I just love how Doug really names the problem that most people are probably just talking about behind the scenes. He brings it to the front. His emails are hilarious, and he's always getting me to think about things in a new way. Last thing from Doug, he's really pushing the status quo. This is a title of an article that he wrote on a marketing site, Why Marketers Need to Rise Above the Deluge of Crappy Content. He also has great graphics that go along with his content a lot of the time. So he says we're all about to be buried in crap. He is not afraid to name it like he sees it. And I think that's done a lot for his brand as a leader at his company. Okay, so beacons, curators, and challengers. I want you to think about those 3 kinds of thought leaders as a potential framework for the people at your organization. But I want to pause here for a second. You might have noticed something. All those examples I just gave you 6 examples of different kinds of thought leaders. They were all CEOs or founders or at the very top of their organization. And I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, you might be saying, okay, like Lee, yeah, like if you're just supporting the CEO of your company, sure, you can make them a thought leader. They're in charge, they're calling the shots, they're signing the paychecks. Of course they can say whatever they want. But I think there's a huge opportunity to pull out voices from other parts of the organization, not just at the very top. And I think that if as marketers, we just focus on the top, we're really missing a lot of the interesting voices and the smart people who are inside our organizations. So I want to call all of us to develop more thought leaders beyond our CEOs and founders. There are tons of people who have good ideas in your organization, not just the founder or CEO. And a lot of times, actually, the founder or CEO is really busy and has so much going on, and it is such a high level that they don't see all of the interesting little projects and experiments and innovations that are going on in the company. So it's our job as marketers to pull out those ideas, to find them and bring them to the surface. I think we can rely more on the power of the humans inside our organization and really bring their voices out. And again, I don't think companies have a perspective or a position, right? Apple doesn't have ideas, but the people who work at Apple do. So let's bring their voices out. Here's an example. I really think that thought leadership could be way more interesting and powerful if people felt empowered to share their ideas and their work. Sorry. Not just what I think of as ads and accolades, which is what I see most people, especially people who are not the head of their company, most people online, their business social media is really just sharing ads and accolades, which really isn't that interesting, and it's definitely not thought leadership. Because remember, thought leadership is thinking in public. I want to hear how people are thinking and how that's driving their work. And everything else is just promotion. We're marketers, we know about promotion. It's honestly pretty boring. I want to hear the good, juicy human ideas. So here's an example. I didn't want to shame anyone by pulling out anyone else's social media post, so I made up my own fake one. So here's the scenario. Let's say that I'm Lee and I work in HR and I created a really cool new diversity and inclusion program at my company. And we win an award for it, okay? Here's how I could share that news online. I could say, I'm so excited, I'm so proud. My company won a big award, we're the best. I'm so proud of my team. Here's a link to the award with a bunch of pictures of us dressed up at the award gala, yay. Okay, so when people see that, what do they say? They say, oh, great, Lee, okay, looks like you're doing well, great, okay, you won an award, cool, looking good. They know nothing about the work that led to that award. They know nothing about me or how I think or about my company. So here's a different way I could approach that from more of a thought leadership perspective, promoting my ideas and my work and think in public. I could share what this award was all about. How did it start? It started with an idea. 2 years ago, I had an idea. I thought, what if we approached our diversity and inclusion in a totally new way? What if we stopped thinking about the quotas my company used to use and we started thinking about the outcomes we were going toward? 2 years ago, we did that. Today, I'm excited to share that we have turned that idea into an award-winning experience that is receiving accolades. Here's what we learned, right? Why did we do it? What did we do? What did we learn along the way? That's so much more interesting for anyone else who's trying to do similar work. It tells a lot more about me, about my company, about my team, and about the work that we're doing. That's what I mean by sharing your ideas and your work, not just ads and accolades, and not just promotion. Thinking this way is a way to really put humans at the center of your content. Another way that I think we can do that is by not having blog posts by the brand team. Blog posts need to be by people. Companies don't write blog posts, people do. Every idea needs a name attached. So here is, I just pulled this from an HR blog. They're saying that HR's new responsibility is addressing social injustice. Okay, that's a bold statement, right? That's different than how we think of corporate HR. Cool. So Says who, right? Who's telling me that? The company doesn't think that. Obviously, a person wrote that. Who is it? Every idea needs a name attached. Here, similarly, we're talking about HR. We're saying there's a missing link in the HR organization. Becca thinks that. Check. Got it. Now I can learn more about Becca, who she is, how she's doing that work, right? Kimberly thinks we need to work like an Olympian. Let me hear more. I know who's talking about it. So, okay, this is my last part. Let's think about how we do this. So if you're a marketer and you're saying, great, all this is cool. I want to help people throughout my organization become thought leaders and develop their ideas. How do I do that? How do I empower people to do this? Especially when, like I said at the very beginning, people get so tongue-tied when they think about, you know, what a thought leader would say. How can we show them that they are thought leaders already? So the framework that I always come back to, I think about this even in my own writing, is to find the overlap between what your audience needs and what you can uniquely provide. The overlap there is sometimes really tiny, and that's okay, but that's your thought leadership. Your audience needs a lot of stuff, but you're not necessarily the best person to provide all of it. You're the best person to provide information about what you know the most about and what you're the most passionate about. Writing about the future of work, if that's what your audience is interested in, not that helpful because a lot of other people are talking about that too. And that's really broad. But if you're writing about how to rethink communication on remote teams in different time zones, that could be something that's right in that sweet spot. So start with your audience. Think about, what are they stressed out about? These are classic marketing persona questions. What do they need? And what are they looking for? This is important, that isn't already available, that your thought leaders could provide. Then, again, before you get to the person, I do think it's important to understand your overall company brand message and strategy. So the way I think about that is when people hear your company name, what do you want them to think about, right? So in this future of work example, maybe it's rethinking remote communication on teams in different time zones. Okay, we need to make sure that anything that we put out under thought leadership builds up into that overall message. And then we get to the specific person. So if we're looking at a specific thought leader, we're asking, what can they uniquely contribute? Here's a list of ideas. They could contribute expertise. What do they know? Guidance, advice. Maybe they're great mentors and good at giving advice to other people based on what they've learned. Perspective, how they know it. What's their story? How did they learn it? Maybe they're great curators. They can provide connections. Or maybe they can give us a new way of looking at it. They're really bold and have a new viewpoint. Or thought leaders can even be an ear. Thought leaders can listen. They don't just talk. So they could create a community where they're listening and providing a place to hear what's going on. And then I think about those different categories, right? So, okay, if I know someone's an expert, maybe they could be my beacon. If I know someone is really great at creating connections between people, maybe they're my curator. And if someone has new ideas that they're always bringing up on the company Slack, maybe they're my challenger. And when we think about really going into those conversations with potential thought leaders, let's say that you've identified that Jane has a lot to say about remote work, and she has built your product. She's knows all about the ins and outs of how to change the thinking about online communication to work better together, right? So you go and you schedule a 30-minute phone call with Jane and you say, okay, Jane, in this call, I want to figure out who you are, what you know about, and I want to write 5 blog posts together that you're going to put out about this. That's too much. So my goal is, as a marketer, kind of working as a thought leader whisperer, which is what I think of myself as, to be a thought leader whisperer, you have to be patient. So this is what I have learned from working with thought leaders, especially people who I don't already know well. Plan more than one conversation. Give Jane a second to breathe and understand what you're trying to get from her. So maybe that first conversation is just getting to know her, asking a bunch of questions, brainstorming together. And then after that, you can plan more specific deep dives that she has a little bit more time to think about. Come prepared with tons of questions. Don't assume that you know anything about Jane. Ask her all about her background, her history, what's exciting to her, what she does outside of work, everything you can do to get to know her and understand kind of how she could approach these ideas, how she's thinking. I also like to try different formats. Some people like the phone, some people like video calls. Back before the pandemic, if you were working in person with people, I find that walking meetings or lunch meetings can be helpful. I like walking because you're not looking at each other. And sometimes for more introverted people, that can be a helpful way to think. And some people love brainstorming over email or, kind of reviewing text-based documents together. So if you're not clicking when you're just asking people questions on the phone, try a different format. And then I also like to ask people what thought leaders they admire. Where do they get their information and their guidance about work? Who are they looking to? That can help you understand how they think, what they value, and who they want to be more like. And finally, sometimes I find that people are not great writers or thinkers on the fly, but if they can work more as an editor, if you can write something up based on even just a quick conversation you have with them and give them a draft to react to, they might have a lot to say once they go into editor mode. I've worked with a lot of people who are busy or who aren't quite sure what they want the end product to look like. So they can't really tell me when I ask them as a writer, but when I give them a draft and they're kind of in the position of authority as an editor, they really can shine. And that's when they start bringing out all their good ideas. Because they'll say, nope, it wasn't like this. What I actually mean is this other thing I've never told you before. So that can be a good way to get them going. So my final words to you, I've taken up all my time here. Thought leaders are just people who think in public, and that thinking is the important part. What are they sharing? They're sharing what they know, how they learned it, and what's coming next. Those are the three important things to think about when you think about what your thought leaders could share. Okay, and that's it. I talked fast. That's all I have for you today. We're going to go into a Q&A section, I think, but I wanted to say if you are interested in thought leadership and you want to kind of keep thinking about this together, I write a newsletter every other Friday about the future of thought leadership, funny stuff I find in thought leadership. You can sign up at leepriceideas.com. And like John said, the team at Scribewise has been awesome enough to have a donation component along with today's webinar. So the National Diaper Bank Foundation is something that really is important to me and my family that I support every year. And I would encourage you to make whatever little donation you can at the link that this team has provided. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lee. I'm going to go through a couple of questions from the Q&A. So if anyone has any additional questions, you can drop them in the Q&A now. And I'm also going to drop the donation link again into the chat just so that everyone can see it. So first question that we have, Lee, is how do you encourage thought leaders to start challenger conversations? So, I feel like being a challenger is probably one of the more difficult ways of being a thought leader. So how would you approach that?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that not everyone is a good candidate to be a challenger, right? I don't think you're going to have a lot of success if you're pushing someone who's kind of cautious or formal into that role, right? The examples I gave you, Katie and Doug, those are people who are charging into that role. They're excited about doing it. So if you have someone who really thinks that they have bold ideas, especially if they started the company based on bold ideas, or the product they're developing is really kind of a challenger product, I think an easy way to start is using the product, the ideas behind the product as kind of your entry point into the conversation. So keeping it close to what really your core business is.
Great. And one question that I had kind of related to that, when we're thinking about some things, some of our belief systems and values as people, especially on things like social issues, how can we balance thought leadership with the company values and beliefs without kind of overstepping those boundaries for the company?
Yeah, so that's why I think it's important, like I said, that you have really clear brand values and a brand strategy so that your thought leaders know what framework to work inside, right? So if you're publishing something on behalf of Scribewise as Cassie, you want to make sure that your values align with what the company thinks. If you're publishing something as Cassie on your personal website, under your personal brand, I think that that could be a little bit different, and you could be talking about topics that are not directly aligned. But yeah, I would just say understanding kind of as a team and agreeing, having some alignment on those core values can be really helpful.
Great. And in terms of people who might be a little bit more inexperienced when it comes to thought leadership, do you recommend something like media training if they're going to be, kind of a public facing figure for the company, especially if they're going to be talking to reporters or participating in speaking engagements?
Yeah, I think media training is helpful. And I can often tell, again, as the editor or the reporter who's talking to thought leaders, it's very clear when someone has had media training, right? Because they really have their talking points down. If they don't know how they're going to answer, you can kind of hear the same turns of phrases people will say. They'll say, that's a great question. Let's think about that. I think that there can be a little bit of a danger in too much media training, though, because I think that it starts to push everyone to be very corporate and polished and formal. And if we really want these human perspectives and ideas to come out, you have to let people stay open enough to give real answers that mean something, that are not just the party line. So I think media training is great, but I think the challenge is really to find ways to let personalities still come through.
Great. Okay, another question. How do you deal with CEOs who want to be the primary thought leader for their company, even if they don't have the time?
This is hard, right? Because a lot of times we want to get ideas from our CEOs and they're very busy. Sometimes it'll take a month to get onto their calendar and then they'll cancel the meeting at the last minute. I've definitely been there. I would say that I would try to maximize any time that you can get with that person. So if you can get them to agree to a once a month standing meeting, take it and, be flexible on your time and know in advance what you want to talk to them about. And again, remind them that this is their priority. It's your priority for the company to have thought leadership going out and you want it to be in your voice. If you want to do that, here's what I need from you. Make the process really clear to them. I need to talk to you for 20 minutes, ask you these questions, and I need you to review this draft so that we can publish this in your voice, within a week or whatever. I think reminding them of their priorities that they have stated and then telling them the process you're going to use to make it as easy for them as possible. I wouldn't just wait for your CEO to write a blog post. It's never going to happen with most CEOs.
Yeah. And a related question, what is your advice for working through the revisions process with thought leaders where you're writing the content for them?
Yeah, so as a writer, when you send something to a thought leader and you hear nothing, that's the worst sign for me, right? I would rather have feedback because then there's information there that I can work with. When I hear nothing and nothing and nothing, and you follow up and you still don't hear anything, that's when I know it's time to have another conversation, because often there was one little thing, one turn of phrase, or one slight opinion that you got wrong as the writer. And that is just completely blocking the person from being able to really process it, right? Because they're so afraid of being portrayed the wrong way online. So I think talking to them and really getting to the core of what's going on. So many times, like I said, I've been in that scenario where it was literally one sentence that they didn't like, and getting them to just acknowledge that and tell you that so that you can move forward is helpful. So I would say trying to get back on the phone and help them identify exactly what they want to change.
Cool. Great advice. We have a couple more that we can get to. How do you characterize thought leadership versus content marketing? Heidi says she often thinks of them as overlapping.
Yeah, I think they're overlapping too. I think that what sets thought leadership apart is that it's really human-based, right? So I think the brand has a content marketing strategy. I think people have thought leadership strategies. So it's really about bringing those human idea processes front and center. And I think of thought leadership as a subset of content marketing for sure. I hope that answered your question, Heidi.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And last question, with LinkedIn being so saturated now, do you have any advice on how to break through the noise to reach your audience?
Yeah, so I think that some marketers will certainly give you tips and tricks and tactics all day for how you can, put links in the comments and all the other little hacks to get through the LinkedIn algorithm. But for me, I think it really comes down to what I talked about in terms of promoting or sharing your ideas and your work and kind of the story of how something came to life, instead of just promoting, hey, I'm doing a webinar. Hey, I published a blog post. Hey, we won an award, not focusing on what happened, but focusing on how it happened and why, and really using those storytelling powers. Even though LinkedIn is so noisy right now, I actually think not that many people are doing, are really following that best practice. So I think that it's not that hard if you're willing to think about it differently and think about it as a storyteller to stand out a little bit more.
Great, definitely great advice. So I'm going to welcome John back.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks for running the show here today. And Lee, thanks for your great presentation, all your great thoughts. I love the idea of thinking in public. And I think that's a great way for us to frame it to our clients, to thought leaders we're working with, to people in your organization. Because there's always, it seems, a reticence that things aren't quite perfect. So thanks for that. And then one other thing, as soon as you mentioned that I was a fan of Doug Kessler, I have to tell you, I got a Slack message from my team saying more like fanboy. So, and the rest of them rolled their eyes. So yeah, he's terrific. Everybody, our next event is October 20th, same time, 11:30, with Heidi White, the CMO of Navigate. We're going to talk about how they embraced content marketing and really kind of grew up from being what we call an adolescent company into a company that is really starting to have some significant success. They were obviously quite successful beforehand, but they've taken it to the next level under Heidi's leadership to a large extent. Thanks again. If you can make a donation to the National Diaper Bank Network, that would be terrific. And everybody have a great day. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Bye, everybody.